Did we already start again? Yeah, we're
Indeed.
on. We're on. You see, I don't know. I might have to carry the show because I heard that you took 200. I was just fucking around. No, you're gonna have to carry this show, Gary. Okay, in that case, way too high. I took 200 milligrams of RSO, thinking that it would kick in at a specific time, and the show started later. And well, you just fucked up my time clock, and like my time clock is very specific. So yeah, I don't know what's gonna happen, and I still gotta like manage the board and fucking software. Okay, well here's the situation. Number one, it's Sunday. Number two, we're in Ybor City. Number three, it's time to judge the criminalization. The idea is a little kick in the ass, and then things just start moving forward. I just need to stretch a little bit. I'll be good. I got coffee. Yeah, and I got my coffee bustelo. It's got a con leche straight from my quarter machine. It's not like I've never done the show on TV. I'm not sure you haven't. So what's like happening? We gotta like talk about weed, right? Yeah, and of course we need to throw in, by the way, a heartfelt 20-year anniversary of 9/11 yesterday. We need to acknowledge the fact that it happened because it changed so much, in part because of the Patriot Act and everything else that happened afterward, including getting into a war that lasted 20 years and cost us $300 million a day. We did it since the day that we entered it. It's my understanding that we didn't even win. Well, no, it's what is called defeat with honor, right? Defeat with honor. I don't think we can win wars, and I think it's because we haven't lived honor because we lost Vietnam too. We necessarily lose Vietnam. We still know where it is. We lost. We just can't. Actually, we've become friends pretty much with the Viet Cong. They changed into a much more commercial model, and over the years, things have gotten better. I don't know that that's going to happen with the Taliban. You know, my roommates have even just me. But here's the thing: I definitely lost it because asked me to point to it on a map. No fucking way. I can't even point you to a map right now.
Y'all are too funny.
Now that said, in regards to the Islamic nations of the world, don't forget that is essentially where hashish basically came from. It was from the Middle Eastern folks who had utilized it in that fashion. At one point in time, they thought that the word hashish actually meant assassin in Arabic, which was not necessarily true. But that was one of those kind of political things that happened in Europe back in that day that was to demonize what we are currently now using as medicine once again for the first time in a century. So we do move on, and things do change, and hopefully we'll get it right this time. This time? This time. Well, I get hashish right every time, Gary. and of course, the king of hashish, Frenchie, he passed away a little while ago. We're not going to get too much nostalgia there. We need to move forward with this. This whole program in Florida needs to move forward. It needs to get better. Yeah. We need more weed for more people. I think that's the only way that moving forward really works. Yeah. The only problem I have with RSO is the fact that it is a solvent-based process to leach everything out of the entire plant from root to tip. That's okay. Here's the thing about chemistry, right? And I'm actually kind of going to relate this to what's like happening in Delta 8. And like, there's a lot of talk from like the cannabis community about how Delta 8 is a dangerous compound. Gary? Yes. And no, they don't say Delta 8 is a dangerous compound. Well, the process in which it's made creates various isomers and isotopes that we're not 100% certain of what they do and what kind of action they take on the body. Okay, but like, so concentrates, I don't know, I'm too high to do this show. The concentrates are solvent-based, but the solvent-based concentrates, right, like BHO, right? Once you get if you do BHO right, BHO is actually a superior form of concentrates, right? BHO is nothing but like the terpiest, most delicious form of concentrates that you can come across, right? But
provided it's melted at the right temperature, because terpenes do die at certain high temperatures.
Yes. So like that's what I'm saying. If it's done right, what I'm saying is there's no middle ground here. Mm-hmm. I'm saying that it's either done fantastic or it's gonna kill you, right? so if it's done fantastic, right? Should we deny ourselves the fantastic just in case we're gonna get someone that's gonna kill you?
No, but it's not here either or. There is a spectrum. I mean, I like the idea of the solventless press because like you don't have any solvents left over, like benzene and that, or that might get involved in there that might not do as well for you. Again, when I started this trip back in the 1870s, we had flour and we had flour. Essentially, we had tie stick too, which was kind of strange looking sticky stuff on a stick. And we said that was the most bizarre stuff we ever saw before. But I never get ceased to amaze as to what the companies in Florida and across the country are coming up with as far as new products are concerned. Everything from nano-encapsulated drinks and edibles and things of that sort to powder, which you're supposed to add to things and never does, right?
I mean, you started weed now, right? Like, isn't that like a can of Coke or whatever?
Yeah, but you can't use your credit card because you can't use credit cards for cannabis in the United States.
Have
you have to use your ID.
There's that can of snort or whatever. I forget the fucking name. Like somebody knows the name and put it in the chat. But like, there's like this white powder that you snort, and it's not cocaine, right? But it gets you high like weed.
You mean the THC?
Are you talking about snuff? You talking about snuff?
God damn it! Like you guys haven't seen this shit. There's cocaine. I want to fucking get it. Where is it? Damn, did I like fucking hallucinate that shit?
That is
maybe.
I swear this shit exists.
Maybe you saw it in the ayahuasca ceremony.
I am just gonna. I Googled snortable cocaine. There we go. Cannabis. This shit.
There you go.
Cannabumps.
Yeah. Okay.
Is this a South Florida cannabis product? Because I just can't see anybody from anywhere else in the world.
I imagine it would do really well in the Miami market. First off, I got some overlays here before we get to the cannabis, right? This is the weed that Gary smoked in the 70s.
Yes, that is actually those are actually the best strains from High Times back in the 70s. And I'm just like, I can't believe y'all used to smoke that.
And this is what I'm talking about.
And notice the one on the bottom, which looked kind of like Florida.
I think this is actually like I don't think this is available in Florida dispensary.
No, it says California.
Yeah, it does say California.
The far right hand corner there, you see that little CA?
Yeah.
If you get a product in Florida that says that, it's like, okay, either it came from California or it came from here and someone put California on it to make it look black market. I'm sorry, legacy market.
But they got snortable weed now, guys. You can fucking if you're doing cocaine, you want to get off the cocaine and onto pot, you can do that by snorting pot.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, that almost makes vapes look so much more enticing, doesn't it?
I mean, vapes always look kind of good, but I don't know.
Well, interestingly enough, the FDA, they pulled a lot of vapes off the market this last week. And they were specifically nicotine vapes, kind of like Juul, because they were constantly saying that this is only water vapor you're breathing out, and it's not. And so therefore, it was false advertising. And in part, they're still dealing with the vape crisis we had a year and a half ago when we had essentially the legacy market folks buying counterfeit carts from China that looked like actual products and putting it in, and because it was thinner, they thickened it with vitamin E, tocopherol, which basically is used to thicken necks and not for inhalation. And a lot of people got sick.
Honestly, it's my understanding that
number of different things. Like, yes, you're right. That is a major thing there. But like, it's my understanding that the major problem was that people are fucking making this shit in their fucking garage and not knowing what the fuck they're doing. And that's one of the things that they were doing. But they were doing like a whole spectrum of stupid shit to their vapes. And once people started cracking down and really caring with this fucking number went down.
Yeah, that's one more aspect of the legacy market that we need to deal with. And there's good and there's bad aspects, in part because there are people in the legacy market right now who have been doing this for the last 30, 40 years, because they've had a heck of more experience. You know, a lot of the people who are even running MMTCs now. And if they actually do care about their product and actually do care about accountability, then that's a product that you could be proud of utilizing if you can, if you have access to it. The problem is, with the black market, it is a legacy market. It is a crapshoot. You really don't know what you're going to get unless you really, really know the guy you're talking about. And the guy on the corner is only named guy on the corner because of the fact he has a certain amount of anonymity. Therefore, lack of accountability. Would you agree, Chris?
All in all, I mean, no, I think all in all, look, there needs to be safety standards. There needs to be protocols to developing legal cannabis products, and folks making BHO in their garages, making it in their kitchens is dangerous. You're dealing with solvents, and if you don't have an extensive education in chemistry, if you don't understand how extracts works, you can blow yourself up. Then does that make the product itself any less dangerous? The product itself is a medicine, but like any medicine, if you're not an expert, you don't know how to make it, then you can wind up with the compounds that can be harmful. So again, if you're purchasing cannabis concentrates, they need to be lab tested for solvents. They need to be lab tested for impurities, for your protection, which is why I'm so big on third party laboratory testing in the state of Florida and across the country.
Absolutely. I think
That's should we deny like that there's such this like big push in the market to get away from things like DHA, right? And and go to like CO2 or go to rosin. But should we deny fucking people this awesome, fantastic DHA that's done right and properly and pure that has this
well, here's the problem. How would
content,
you?
right?
It's kind of like
Just because like people will fuck it up, right? If we got a regulated market, right? Like it should be all right, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It's kind of like a thermos, you know. You put hot stuff in a thermos, it stays hot, right?
Yeah.
You put cold stuff in a thermos, it stays cold. How does the thermos know? That's the question. And the question is, when you get a product and they say it's safe, and how do you know it's safe? And this is what I'm coming down to. It helps to be educated. It helps to know what level of education you can understand as well. Many people will always say, do your own research. Well, that's great, but if you haven't taken the remedial courses, you're not going to understand the graduate course. And if you're going straight to the graduate course, you're not going to understand what the heck you're reading. But I suggest to everybody, learn how to read a COA, a certificate of authenticity, because that is your lab report. That lets you know what is in the product you're using. Not only just what what terpenes are in there, what cannabinoids are in there at the mixes, so that you could replicate that if you need that same kind of product again. You don't have that exact same strain, but also what heavy metals are in there, what solvents that are left in there, etc. And if there's any mold or bacteria, that kind of situation. Know how to read a COA and ask for it when you buy a product, but it's supposed to be tested.
And like actually scanned, like all products in Florida pretty much have that fucking scannable QR code.
Now it's amazing.
Scan that shit for yourself.
Well, there's a problem with QR codes too.
Why is there a problem with QR
Because
codes? Scary.
there are QR codes for sale out there that you can stick on the product if you wanted to. They will point to anything. Sometimes it even points to nothing. But they will stick a QR code. So definitely, if there is a QR code, go ahead and fully scan it, and then see if you can verify that the product you bought is the product that scan is going to. It could be going to a report on an entirely different product altogether somewhere in California. we don't look at it carefully. Because we have a lot of people who are not as honest as they should be in this business. That's unfortunate, but it happens when you start out with a product which is illegal, and therefore it attracts certain people within that illegal market who don't care. Whereas there's also people in that market who do care a lot, and you have to know who's who.
You know what I find the most difficult thing on the COA to find is like the straight name. That's like the hardest thing for me to find. Like it's like a fucking line. Like they don't highlight it. They don't fucking. A lot of places don't. They're scientists. They know how to fucking figure out, HPLC tests. But
The reason, where do they get the strain name on those COs?
from the dude sending it to them.
Exactly. And the dude sending it may not actually even know what the hell they even got. So sometimes the strain names by themselves are not a good enough indication, because to give you a good example, the good people at Certera, and I use that term, that word obviously, at one point in time had put out Mayaka Gold. And of course I jumped on it because I knew the guy who grew it from scratch years ago. And I knew that that's not what they had. But they said, yeah, well, we got these clones from someplace, and they told us it was Mayaka Gold. And yet the guy who grew it said, but we grew it at ground level. We didn't grow it in the mountains. It's not. And what you're looking at here is an indica, whereas my Mayaka Gold was a sativa.
That's crazy because like I actually was just telling Olivia here working the store, hi, that we the dispensary that I worked at, the guy that fucking owned the place was a piece of shit, but he knew a lot about weed, but he was a fucking piece of shit. Anyways,
everybody has a good side.
So we would sell the strains that he grew out of the dispensary. And one of the strains he grew, like when I got there, it was originally called Candy Bananas. And it was one of those fucking strains that like he adds the additive at the end, and it tastes like banana alligators.
So he puts banana in it.
Whatever it is, banana ink.
That's why we used to smoke bananas back in the 80s when we didn't have any cannabis around.
Smoke bananas? What is happening right now?
That dates me. But
did bananas get you high?
Yes. Well, there is a certain terpene that's in banana ink, kind of like X and similar to CBN.
Is that what like he was trying to do? With like, anyways,
I can't say for certain where he was trying.
He would put this additive into it that made it taste like banana nowadays. And candy bananas didn't sell as well as it should have, and he was putting all this effort, putting additives in it to make it taste like banana, right? So he decided to change the strain name one day. And he changed it to Banana Kush, thinking that it would sell better that way. And I'm not sure if it sold better that way, but that's like for marketing purposes. Sometimes these dudes are just like, you know what? Just call that fucking shit, skippity doo dah.
Well, yeah,
maybe that'll sell.
I mean, the people who name these strains, I think they should just give it up. I mean, with all due respect to the good folks at the particular dispensary that has a product, I can't find myself able to utilize a product called Booty Tang. It just is beyond me to be able to understand a product that's named that.
Have you never seen the movie Booty Tang?
Yes, and it has nothing to do with this.
You have seen the movie Booty Tang.
I think I've never seen a piece of it.
So, only a piece of it. So then you don't really understand Booty Tang, Gary.
I can honestly say I do. Okay.
Asarate.
You can put as much.
Water Carlos. Water
Asarate on the tipita. You see, you have no idea what's going on right now. That's why you don't like this great Booty Tang. I smoke Booty Tang all the time just because I've seen it. You see, strain name marketing works.
I suppose.
Well, look, all in all, Carlos is right about concentrates. The science is behind him. As a matter of fact, in London, in the United Kingdom, over in England, they've been working in their clinical journal of clinical pharmacology on a study which looked at 110 subjects over the course of 6 months to assess their use of cannabis extracts, and that they found that there were significant improvements in patients' pain conditions over the study periods. And the adverse effects that were associated with taking cannabis concentrates were described as being mild or moderate at best in intensity. So, Carlos, you just dropped 200 milligrams of RSO. Would you describe your side effects as mild right now?
Oh, he didn't drop it. He got it all. I would describe it as moderate from my end over here right now.
You know what time it is, Gary?
Oh boy.
Here's the mild side effect of sitting next to Gary's side. Is the G spot.
Come at it. One of these days I'm gonna have to get back at you for that.
I like the.
But I can't hit a man when he's moving.
Bro, just fucking come up with another name for the segment. Just come up with it. Just text me one day and say, I want to call it this. And I'll be like, word, and I'll make an even better video. I actually kind of really want to make a better video. That video is horrible. I thought it was cool after I made it, but I've gotten better at making videos. The video sucks.
as is the name.
Yeah. Well,
But some such as life. All right, well, let's talk about some of the cannabis news here and around the world. And we're going to start out with Italy. Italy this last week, believe it or not, decriminalized recreational cannabis and legalized home cultivation in the country.
What does that mean, decriminalizes recreational cannabis? It's just decriminalized weed, right?
It basically the same thing. Doesn't make it legal, but it doesn't. But it is no longer criminal. Chris, what is the best way to describe the word decriminalization as opposed to legalization?
Well, decriminalization implies that the criminal penalties are essentially, not there, or that there's civil penalties for being, caught with it. Right now in the city of Tampa, if an officer so chooses, they can write you a civil citation for $75 if you have 20 grams or less on you. Now, there's a lot of other mitigating factors on that. Is that cop an asshole? Is he having a bad day? Do you fit the description of someone who, he thinks is a drug dealer, right? So, my big thing is officer discretion. It doesn't really amount, in my view, to decriminalization. Decriminalization should mean if you got caught with pot, you get a ticket, end of story, you pay your ticket, right? And that's essentially where the difference between legalization, which has no sanctions, and decriminalization, which is just a lack of criminal penalties, kind of line up in the grand scheme of things.
For those of you that might be confused by what Tano just said, basically saying officer discretion is saying cops can still be racist.
Yep.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Yep.
It's a cultural thing. Yeah, we have a situation here in Pasco
Cops
County.
want to lock up the black guys, so we're still going to let them, and, white guys can smoke weed.
Now, I kind of like my sheriff over at Pasco County and Sheriff Daco, but he has this policy of kind of a minority report type of arrest, where if you fit the profile of somebody who's going to commit a crime, they're going to look at you with more scrutiny. And there's got to be a better way to put that, but he feels that is going to decrease crime.
Yeah, by Minority Report, Gary, you mean the movie featuring Tom Cruise where they have psychics that predict crimes, not reports on minorities, which is actually what the sheriff is doing.
That's interesting. Yeah, it's not four bald ladies in a pool sitting there telling them what to do. It's them just saying, "Oh, look, that dude is too dark to be driving all by himself with a broken headlight that's maybe broken next week."
I think I finally understand that movie.
All it took was 200 milligrams of RSO and a racist sheriff for Carlos to get a Tom Cruise movie.
Yeah, there you go.
Tom Cruise is racist. I get it now.
No, Gary, I want to pause on that for a second because we talk about police reform a lot on this show, and the sheriff in Pasco County was essentially busted by advocates and by the feds that they're collecting data on like young black kids, and then they're going into the schools, like they're looking at their school records, and then they're keeping these records as a, oh well, this is someone who we can. It's almost like they're trying to create the school to prison pipeline, which has been broken in many ways. But they're finding workarounds. They're trying to patch it so they can continue to put kids and saddle them with criminal records earlier and earlier in life. That to me is wrong. It's fascist.
It is, and hopefully we will change that over time. Like you said, he got busted, and he's having to review his policies, and try to figure out how to make things good. I mean, we have politicians sometimes who make some really crazy ideas. I mean, God bless Governor Greg Abbott in Texas. He believes that if you remove the chance of having abortions, then all of a sudden rape is going to go away. I haven't quite figured out the mechanism for that yet. I kid you not. I mean, this is not a cannabis subject, but he is under the belief, and he has said it in various speeches, that if you make abortion something you can't get easily, and for some odd reason, rape will go away because rapists will say, I can't rape that woman, she can't get an abortion. I mean, that kind of logic coming from a rapist is not exactly what you call logical thinking.
Here's the thing that like really has been scaring me lately is that there's people in America that agree with him and they vote and influence my life. It's crazy.
No, it's not crazy. I mean, politicians tend to influence our lives whether we want to or not. I mean,
Gary, Texas politicians don't shock me at all. From the blunders that we heard from President George W. Bush, like how America never stops, figuring out ways to hurt itself, to just Governor Abbott saying those type of things. I mean, I don't want to shit on the state of Texas, but the state of Texas produces some of the most wackiest politicians in this country's history.
Absolutely, and. But I would give a little bit of credit to Texas for making one of the babiest of baby steps this last year and actually increasing the products they have, which is low THC cannabis, to go from 0.3%. They can go all the way up now to 1% THC in the product.
Holy shit! Wow. Stop the presses! 1%!
Now, that would be good if you're still talking about hemp products, because it is very hard to grow a hemp product which is less than 0.3% THC. And it's easier to get that 1% deadline if you're just looking to create a CBD product. But if you're actually looking for a medicinal product, and you say, well, we're going to allow you to have 1% intake now, I'm not going to see a great deal of increase in amount of treatment for debilitating conditions if you only allow a little extra THC. Because people who have severe pain, PTSD, things of that sort, might need more than just CBD with 1% THC. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, look, we started off the show talking about and just paying homage a minute to the fact that for the past 20 years, the war on terror has escalated, and for many people, seeing the withdrawal from Afghanistan, seeing the Taliban who were on the ropes, within 6 months of us being in the country in 2001, 2002, taking the country back over, that was a hard loss for a lot of folks. And the same with the war on drugs. This government has destroyed, and when I say this government, I mean we the people, the United States government, have destroyed the lives of more Americans with criminal records, with no-knock raids, with attacking and raiding the wrong houses. I mean, it still shocks me that these cases of folks can't get the address right in a time of GPS. It just irritates me to no end. And what was it all for? What were these billions and trillions of dollars spent, these hundreds of thousands of lives destroyed for, in the grand scheme of things, for cannabis to become something that Wall Street investment bankers can get into if they just buy a couple politicians, maybe bribe you could be a real estate developer, know nothing about cannabis, bribe a city councilman in Tallahassee, and then boom, now you have a multi-state cannabis operating company. I mean, these type of things just disgust me to no end.
I've heard this story before somewhere.
Well, let's be certain. We should have learned the lessons that Russia and England learned during the last a couple times that they tried to take over Afghanistan, and we were there for many years and left with their tail between their legs and a lot of money missing. But for some odd reason, Afghanistan took place like a lot of other third world countries that had a commodity that the first world countries wanted. Back, believe it or not, at the turn of the century, sugar was that kind of a commodity. That's why we attacked the Philippines. That's why we went after Cuba, because we were going after the sugar. And they felt, for some odd reason, we felt that those countries couldn't handle the product that they grow on their own soil. And so we had to go in there and take it over so we could have access to that commodity. In Afghanistan, it has been the opium poppy. It was also that same thing in China as well. We actually had a huge conference in China in 1906 where we went over there to help them out because they had a huge opium problem. And who interfered? Britain. Why? Because they were one of the major usurpers of the opium trade in the world. And so therefore, a lot of times commerce does affect how we go after countries. And in this particular instance, Afghanistan has always been not very oil rich, but they are opium rich. And that has had at least one thing besides military advantage in regards to its position. It's one of the reasons people have been going after Afghanistan for years.
So, Gary, are you saying that, the United States foreign policy has been dictated by essentially who's going to control the drug trade in the world and in the West?
Drug trade and even the sugar trade, which is the reason why.
I mean, when sugar is, to me, is a drug. I mean, it's chemically identical to the effects in the brain as cocaine. So let's lump sugar in there with coke and weed if we're going to talk about drugs.
One lump or two in there. But what was interesting though is that Nixon figured out the way to finally win the war of sugar was to not be reliant on sugar from cane, but to go ahead and start creating high fructose corn syrup. And that was back in the 1970s when the product started going up and up and up as far as the cost of sugar is concerned. And we weren't going to deal with Cuba anymore, obviously. And so we had to do something else. And so we created a product which actually is addictive, which is as a sugar base, because high fructose corn syrup actually makes you hungrier. And that's why you can't eat just one.
Gary, have you seen that Amazon show called Hunters starring Al Pacino? It's about a show about hunting Nazis in the 70s.
Oh, it sounds like fun.
Well, the plot to the show, not to be a spoiler, but the Nazis are putting high fructose corn syrup into Americans' foods. That's their evil plan.
I can see them do that, kind of like the way CIA was putting crack cocaine into black neighborhoods to try to flip them.
Ooh, Gary for the win, COINTELPRO.
I'm just saying we sometimes tend to stack the deck in our favor, utilizing substances.
Well, the fact that Nixon said marijuana was public enemy number one, and then to see that the current director of the U.S. National Institute of Drug Abuse, Nora Volkow, said last week on a podcast hosted by Ethan Nadelman, who's the previous former director of the Drug Policy Alliance, she admitted that when she initially took office, she thought that marijuana legalization would lead to an increase in the prevalence of adolescents consuming cannabis. And thus far, every study shows it hasn't. As a matter of fact, the Journal of American Medicine for Pediatrics showed that the enactment of laws regulating the use of cannabis by adults, adult use, full legalization, recreational legalization, whatever terminology you want to use, is actually associated with declines in young people using cannabis.
That is the case, and of course, if you ever talk to Sue Sisley about that woman who was involved with the IADH, she calls her that woman because of the fact that this product that was given to Sue to go ahead and do studies on PTSD for veterans and things of that sort is some of the most god awful weeds you ever see in your life. I mean, we talk about the crazy stuff we used to get over in the 1980s, but the stuff coming out of University of Mississippi, which they freeze dried, even though it usually has mold in it, and they send it off to the research lab and say, here's a product you can use to go ahead and check on the efficacy of your product. When in fact, you really can't. Not with that quality of product itself.
Now that's the same product that they ship Irv Rosenfeld, right? In his canister he gets from the feds every month. They give him like 300 joints of that shitty swag from Mississippi.
Yes, Irv and Elvie are both. Well, actually, I think Elvie has already quit the product, and I think it's just Irv now. But basically, he's smoking that stuff, and he smokes it day in and day out. He's got 10 joints a day. He's got to go for that every day. So,
He's the last guy in the program now.
yeah, but I think Elby, I think, is backed out. Everybody else has passed away.
Wow. So just to be clear, it takes 10 joints a day to get high from that U.S. government grown swag. That's just that hurts my feelings.
Actually, Herb doesn't get high from this stuff, but it does control his bone growth situation.
He doesn't get high from weed in general.
Mm.
People said him the only time he's told me the only time he's gotten high is off of dabs.
Okay.
When he like smokes regular weed, and like he's kind of an important, like, you know, like I you know, like Arab is kind of an important guy when it comes to marijuana legalization, and he like people who grow and sell marijuana send him shit, give him shit for free. Like this is a guy that's, you know, been around the world talking to a lot of some of the greatest marijuana growers that want to get this guy to smoke his pot and say, this guy's pot is awesome.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
This guy's pot got me so high. But he said that it swears up and down, never has got him high.
Wow.
Never has got him high, only dabs get him high.
So, I mean, that just goes to show what we were talking about in a little bit, you know, previously, was that everybody's endocannabinoid system, we talked about this in other episodes, is different. You know, some folks can take higher amounts than others. So these arbitrary caps on THC, which we've been fighting against, you know, they don't make any sense scientifically because, you know, but then again, it's hard to create a scientific standard for individual dosing, which is why we continue to advocate that your cannabis treatment plan should be between you and your doctor, not you and the government.
Yeah.
Okay, getting back to the G spot, we went way over it, but I want to get to a couple of states that are going on here.
Put your thing back up.
Yeah, Gary, you got to get back to that G spot and stay on it, man.
Well, okay. This is what we're going to ping on right now on our G spot. So I love South Dakota. South Dakota is a great place to get lost, and great place to just hang around and not realize where in the heck you are. But they have this particular governor, Christy Nome, that's spelled Gnome, I do believe, possibly not. But they actually passed a ballot initiative this last year to allow a medical program to begin, only to have a lawsuit go against it after the vote went through, and the Supreme Court backed off saying this particular ballot initiative had more than one subject on it, so therefore we're going to knock it down, which is really backwards even for Florida. Because in Florida, we actually knock these things down before they actually get to the ballot. Here, actually already voted for it and agreed to it. That's when they went ahead and said, you know, something we can't go with this. So South Dakota is still working on the rules and regulations to try to get the program started. Everybody voted for it, and that's because of, again, political intervention over usurping the will of the people. And yet they only had a baby step again this month in regards to they're allowing attorneys to go ahead and consult with cannabis companies to try to work on the rules and regulations and try to get it done right, because there was a disconnect there. But South Dakota, bless your heart. I mean, you guys had a nice little motorcycle rally, which only started about 200,000 cases of people having COVID. But you do you, and we'll just sit back and watch you crumble, I suppose. But we have a spreading thing in this country which is called cannabis legalization, and it's gotten now to all but 3 states officially. I want to include South Dakota because they won that it's only 3, and that would be Idaho, Nebraska, and what was the other?
East Dakota, West Dakota.
Yeah. Kansas, yeah.
Kansas. And bless their hearts, it's interesting because Kansas is really close to Oklahoma, which people are starting to call Toklahoma now because it's such an open system. And it's actually a conservative state, but these other states are still going for it. And Idaho, I figured, was always going to be a holdout. I mean, they really have got their spuds in gear in regards to knocking down cannabis, especially. But they actually are putting together a ballot initiative right now. They're going that way because they figure that the legislature is never going to go for it.
Well, that's the problem, Gary.
Her feet wet now, finally.
That's the problem oftentimes, is that people across the country are standing up to their government, passing ballot initiatives, and you just touched on it. In South Dakota, 70% of their voters this past November voted in favor of Measure 26, which allows for the home cultivation for qualified patients for up to 3 plants. And now their legislature's meeting to rescind that. And I mean, our legislature here in Florida, I feel in many ways pulled a sneaky on us. In the grand scheme of things, we the people passed Amendment 2 with the same amount, over 70% overwhelming support. It says you should have access to the entire plant. Joe Redner even sued the state on that, won in the 2 lower courts and lost at the Supreme Court. And our legislature failed to implement any type of home growing. And without that, you don't really have access to the entire plant. You don't have access to the root system. You can't walk into your Certera or Move or TrueLeave and get a clone and take it home. And so we really don't have a system where we have access to the whole plant. So I feel as though, we even need to go back and sue the state again. My concern is that if we repealed how they implemented it, then we would actually be going backwards in time. But, moving forward, home growing has to be a part of any future decriminalization measures, any legalization measures, because without it, you're making people dependent on a corrupt system. People at home can grow their own medicine that best suits them, and that's the way we need to see it.
I hope to see Idaho's ballot measure move forward. It's actually not a bad one. I mean, it does allow you to possess up to 4 ounces of cannabis at one time. And if you get a hardship waiver, it allows you to grow up to 6 plants. So those people who can't afford it, they're going to be allowed, once they can prove they can't afford it, to go ahead and grow it. Here in Florida, basically, if you make less than 6 figures, you really can't afford it, practically, depending on how you buy things. Grant you, we are getting some new dispensaries here in Florida, which are actually going to have even more expensive product than they're used to seeing. The good folks over at Cookies and Jungle Boys, they actually have Ace that they go for $80 on a regular basis, because these are boutique strains that they grow in lower volume, but it's extremely high quality. And the question is, can we afford higher quality, or do we quality without paying the mega amount for it? I think that's one advantage of still being a medical state, is that if you had an $88 eighth and you had to pay the kind of sales tax they pay in Illinois, or even in Oregon, which is 48% sales tax, you can't afford that product anymore. Whether you want it or not, whether you need it or not for your particular condition, you're not going to be able to afford it. So I think that hardship is definitely the way to go. Have an option. We do have a deal here at Suncoast Normal we're trying to push. That's going to allow what is called designated patient cultivation centers, which allows people to get into a co-op and grow under expert tutelage in an indoor grow, so you don't have to worry about all the situations here in Florida where we get mold and things of that sort and insects, and grow a quality product, which is your medicine. Because if you are growing for medicine, you want it to be medicinal. You want it to be clean enough to be able to do what it has to do without hurting you. And that does require a bit of education.
Well, absolutely. Gary, your bill, I think, is a great compromise. And as much as I am about, not compromising our values and ideals, oftentimes when we get into the political realm, we have to be diplomatic to accommodate, some of the opinions and ideologies of the votes that coalition that we're going to have to build to push things over the top. And I think that your cultivation center idea that you drafted and developed into legislation makes a lot of sense. If the conservative politicians in Florida are never going to go for home grow, then having designated and regulated centers where patients can grow their own medicine and have expert growers assist them, I think is a great compromise. I think it's something that at least people can have access to their own things. And, we talk about the ability of smaller business owners to get into this industry without, being part of a vertically integrated MMTC in Florida. And this is, I think, also a good first step on that sort of thing, to let small business owners get in and run their own cultivation center.
It also helps to listen to the politicians to see what their biggest grievance is, so you can resolve that and get it actually filed and get it put in the committee. Because otherwise, if you can't do that, then the bill is going to be a piece of paper.
Yeah.
And so therefore, this bill also allows us to count the amount of plants in and the amount of plants out. And that prevents what is called diversion, or what other people call the gray market, where they supposedly thought that if you had home grow, that you'd be growing it for the neighborhood as opposed to just for yourself. And that obviously that's just not the case. If people need home grow, but they need it for their own medicine, for the same reason they're not giving out gummies on Halloween, that is their medicine.
Oh yeah, that episode is definitely coming. Next month we're going to start to see the Halloween scares that we see every single year from the Florida Sheriff's Association. I mean, I hate the fact that we have to waste our time when we have so many more valuable things we can be focused on to consistently year after year hold a counter press conference.
Do we need to even talk about it? Like, are people still that dumb to
I
think
don't.
that?
I don't think people are that dumb to believe that there's marijuana candies in the Halloween candy. If it is, there's a lot of millennial parents tasting their kids' candy out there. I can tell you that much.
Gary just said that, like, for like a marijuana patient in Florida, you have to, like, to be able to afford it, it's over $100,000. Like, you gotta make over $100,000 a year. Like, I mean, are people really gonna waste? I mean, granted, like, black market shit's cheaper, but that shit's still a lot of fucking money. You know,
Oh, man.
people are gonna fucking put weed in fucking candy.
I mean, think about it. A going rate of like infused sour patches, what is like here in the DC area, can be $5 to $10 a pack. So who's throwing out $5 to $10 every time they drop a candy in a kid's bucket? You know.
And the truth of the matter is that shit was still going on. I'd figure out a way to trick or treat.
Exactly, right? We'd have a lot more normal members trick-or-treating.
Yeah, like we would have like a normal event where we'd all dress up and go around the neighborhood trick-or-treating. You know?
So
I don't know, was it Everybody Loves Raven episode or something like that, where they were running out of candy, so the guy found a whole bunch of these what looked like gold and silver wrapped coins, and they were actually condoms, and they were passing them out to the kids, thinking they were.
Oh my goodness. Crazy.
So, yeah, so check to make certain that the neighborhood guys are not giving out condoms, but don't expect them to be giving out candies that are actually for people's medicine. It's just not going to happen. But we are going to expect them to hear it again, because as long as a flat earther is out there, there's someone who's going to believe it, that people are giving out candy. Cannabis candy.
Gary, I think it goes back to law enforcement for the past 80 years when it comes to cannabis has had this paternalistic approach to where, oh, we're doing this for your own good. We're ruining your life and giving you a criminal record, and we're going to throw you in a cage with rapists and murderers for your own good. And we're making the world safe. That, you know, one of the big things now that legalization is taking shape is the marijuana DUI statutes across the country. You know, in many states, if you get high, you know, even though it's legal and you get behind the wheel, they're going to hit you with a DUI hard. And DUI laws are nothing fun. You know, Carlos, you can speak to that. That shit is not fun to have to navigate in the court system.
Nah, dude, I was still dealing with that shit recently. Like, I just now got a break on my car insurance.
Shit.
I'm now paying like half of what I paid before. And it's like 10 years ago. Right? I'm still dealing with that shit 10 years ago.
It doesn't make it any easier that Florida has one of the highest insurance rates in the country right now, in part because of the fact that the number of elderly people we have who still have licenses in their 90s, and also the fact that we have a lot of tourists that come here and rent cars who in their own country have so much mass transit they don't need to drive a car.
In Japan, they put a sticker on your car if you have a license over the age of 75. I think we should start doing that in Florida. We should, warning, this person here is, you know, they're closer to their maker. Maybe give them some space.
Yeah, but you can't put Nikki Freed's picture on the stickers.
Well, you know,
I don't think Jerry should have to put a sticker on his car.
I don't need it. I may be OG, but I'm not that OG yet.
Well, you know, I bring up the issue of marijuana. I bring up the issue of marijuana DUIs because a study recently came out in the Journal of Accident Analysis and Prevention out of Aurora, Colorado, and they found something very significant, that occasional marijuana users they drove a little bit faster after getting high, but not really enough to reach any statistical significance. But on contrast, daily cannabis users displayed insignificant changes in their standard deviation and lateral positioning, and actually, after they get high, drove at slightly slower and safer speeds. So folks who only smoke weed once in a while apparently drive a little bit faster when they're high, and folks who smoke every day actually drive a lot slower. And I'm thinking that through. That makes sense, because when you're high, you're looking you're driving, right? You're like, oh, cop, let me slow down. Stop sign, let me not break the law.
Well, I am not a big fan of driving when somewhat intoxicated in any way, shape, or form. But
I feel like I'm better at doing the show while I'm on 200 milligrams of RSO.
I don't know. I have a hard time keeping you on track, but we'll work on it.
All I know is that if you do dabs with Carlos after being sober for an entire year, you will drive home and then forget your keys at his house and drive back to his house to go get your keys.
I had a hallmate, so to speak, in the fraternity house back in college. He would come over, he'd smoke for a while, and then he'd leave, and he'd come back, and he'd wonder why he was not back in his own room yet. Because he would go halfway down the hallway, turn around, and come back, and forget which direction he was going to. That never happens, really. But Joe Redder has this great little saying. It says that people who drink go out and drive when they can't, and yet people who smoke can drive, but they think they can't. And that is basically just your mind working overtime sometimes. Yeah, it is. No matter waiting to see if the stop sign turns green. But generally, people are safer drivers when they use cannabis. But again, I don't recommend it while you're driving. Maybe earlier perhaps if you think you can. But I don't recommend it. That's just my own personal perspective.
Well, we have to create more regulated markets. The Journal of American Medicine, Pediatrics actually did a study, and they found that 0 retailers in the state of California were selling to people who are underage. So if you want to really be a conservative politician saying you're for the kids, then you should be for a regulated adult use market. It causes youth rates to drop. Dispensaries are not selling to kids. The sad part is that kids can walk into any Walgreens or CVS and buy over-the-counter drugs that could potentially kill them. You can walk in with a SpongeBob backpack and light up Skechers. But if you try to do that at a dispensary, it's not going to happen. They're going to ask you to show your ID. You got to be 21 to get through the door.
Is that right? When IDing me is because I have light up Skechers?
No, it's a SpongeBob backpack.
It's the SpongeBob backpack.
The light up Skechers are cool.
I know we got to wrap it up for today. I think Carlos has got to go take a nap. But I do want to make a point of the fact that we here at Southern Coast NORML are doing what we can to change these laws for the better. We have had a law that started in 2017 here in Florida. It still has a lot of glitches to it. We still need to do some fixing. We still need to make sure that we have protections for workers so you don't lose your job or not get a job because you have a medical card. We need to make certain that if you are a patient in an organization that uses federal funds, and we don't have federal legalization yet, we're not going to kick you out for using it in your ALF or in a hospital or things of that sort, and you don't get kicked off the transplant list. Mm-hmm. For the doctors, this is the reason why I wrote this bill in part, need an expansion of qualifying conditions. They don't have to do mental gymnastics to be able to put down exactly what you have and why you need it. And so we can add things like autism and like opioid dependence syndrome.
Tourette syndrome, fibromyalgia, so many different things that cannabis helps mitigate the symptoms of.
Yeah, so rather than having to deal with number 10, which is a condition of like or similar nature, which the Board of Medicine can easily strike down if they felt like they could do it, let's make sure they can't. Let's make sure we nail this down. And of course, the home grow bill. We'd be more than happy to give you a copy of it. If you like reading those kind of things, you can get through it. The important thing is we need to get you in touch with your legislators and go ahead and get them on board. Now, I know that Hillsborough had their legislative delegation this last week which I thought was ill-timed because I didn't have a chance to go. We went to the Orlando one, and that was good. And we have a lot more to go, but there in every county in the state. If you go ahead and check on your county's website and look at legislative delegation, they'll tell you when you can go and speak out loud and say, we need a bill to this effect. And if you want us to give you a copy to give to your legislator, we have plenty of copies to give you.
Gary, I will actually upload them to the Suncoast Normal website. Just make sure that I got them via email in my inbox. Just bump them up to me, and I'll add them to our website. Folks can download them in our legislative section.
And there's three things we're looking for. We are a subscription-based organization, so it costs $25 to be a part of this. We don't just want your money, because face it, a lot of folks ask for your money and they never say exactly what they're doing with it. You will see exactly what we're doing, whatever you have. But we don't want just your money. We would like to see your talent, and we would also like to see you put in your time, because people power is one of the most effective uses we have of our organization to make legislation move forward. And we hope that you will join us in this journey to make this program better. And with that, we close.